neighbors. We are here in another important interview with our invited. She is Mary Lawal. Mary will talk with us today about mental health disparities in African American community. She is an activist and a speaker for youth mental health and suicide prevention awareness. She's former member of the NAMI Next Gen Youth Advisory Board and volunteer at the NAMI Baltimore and NAMI Maryland. She's doing an important job and work for the African American community right here in DC. So thank you so much, Mary, for your time, and we are so happy to talk with you.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
Mary, to start with our conversation, in your experience, what are the biggest mental health challenges faced by the Black community today?
I'd say stigma. A lot of the Black community are dealing with stigma and, just trying to seek mental health care, and then also lack of access to these mental health resources. I believe that because of there not enough awareness in the Black community, that a lot of people struggle with accessing care, and just the fact that there are not enough resources as well. People struggle with accessing care when it comes to mental health. For example, someone that could be struggling with their mental health, and they kind of like are seeking out for help, and they aren't able to access the right therapist that suits them. For example, there's not enough diversity in the mental health field, and when you don't have someone that you can see and relate with, and someone that can understand you, it leads to a break of trust in the mental health system. And also just the fact that there are not enough people that are saying, hey, I have a mental health challenge, and this is how you can access the care. I feel like when a lot of people start coming out and talking about mental health in the Black community, it creates a space of hope and healing, and they're able to recognize that mental health isn't a thing that we should shy away from, but rather it's okay to seek help, and it's okay to talk to a professional to get that care.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for that. How does systematic racism and social inequalities impact the well-being of African Americans?
Yeah, I believe that social racism and just social equality, it kind of silences Black African Americans, and they're not able to voice out. And then also it feels like that they're going through this alone. And I feel like there should be there should be more awareness coming towards social racism, systematic racism, because it kind of creates a hole in our community, and it breaks us down even further. And when no one is really talking about that, it just creates a cycle of we're not healing, we're not we're not talking about it. And then so I feel like just creating awareness around that helps us to kind of heal, and helps us to kind of break out of that and just use our voice. We're able to gain our voice, and so I feel like it impacts our well-being, such as we're seen as we're kind of maybe just we're seen as kind of maybe just it's something that we're not really sure of. We're not really sure about what we're talking about, because sometimes even just racism in the in trying to seek mental health care in a professional world. And so sometimes professionals can kind of dim our experience down, and kind of make it seem as though we don't know what we're talking about, and that can also cause us to feel as though we're not getting the care that we need, and we're just not heard. And so I feel like just standing up for ourselves and advocating for ourselves could be a way of just overcoming that.
Absolutely.
Yes, Mary, you have played you have played an important role, and you participate in multiple panels that highlight the importance of mental health in the African American community, and of course the role that a stigma plays around this important issue in mental health. That's why I want to ask you, what role does cultural stigma play in preventing Black individuals from seeking mental health care?
Stigma plays a huge role in just accessing care in the Black community because, when people shy away from the conversation, when people feel like if they open up, they're going to be judged, it creates it creates a space where people are, struggling in silence. People are having to go through that pain in silence and go through it alone. And it just, it's it when people kind of like have to go through this in silence, it creates a space of, um they're having to just battle it alone. And they have to keep it hidden because they feel like people are going to misunderstand what they're going through. And so I feel like just having to go through that alone and not even being able to seek help on time, not being able to seek that right help on time, just delays the time of getting that support, of getting better, of healing and recovering. So I would say like stigma also affects just people from also feeling heard. That's just something in my personal experience. When I experienced stigma, I felt like my voice was silenced. I felt like no one could hear me. I felt like no one could really understand what I was going through. I felt like my voice was just like it was kind of like I was struggling, but no one could really hear what I was going through. Could hear my voice. And so when I decided to open up, when I decided to advocate for myself and just kind of like break free of that stigma. It's kind of a way of breaking the generational cycles of that stigma and creating awareness and letting people know that, stigma is something that um, it, it doesn't let other people, it kind of like stops other people from, their healing journeys. And so I had to just, tell my parents, who were kind of like the main people in my life that were like, um, that I was affected by stigma by sorry, I don't know if that's the right word, but basically I had to like let them know like, hey, this is something that a lot of people regardless of who you are, regardless of what you look like, mental health doesn't discriminate. And mental health stigma is something that a lot of people um they feel like their voice is kind of like doesn't matter because of stigma, and it doesn't help people. So educating people about mental health helps to limit the stigma, helps to break the stigma. So creating that education, that mental health awareness is a way to kind of like eradicate that stigma and just create a space of where people can feel less alone, where people can feel like their voice is heard, and just a space where people they don't have to like do it alone, and just like allow people to know that mental health is something that is something that you don't have to be scared about. You don't have to go through it alone. And there are people that are willing to walk you through it. There are people that are willing to hear your story. And so, once you open up about your mental health, it's one less person that has to go through it alone. When you share your story, there's power in storytelling, and there's power in just opening up about your mental health. So seeking help should be a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. As people um normally kind of like tag mental health as something that is weak. People usually, that's the stigma. People think that mental health, when you go through mental health, it should be a weakness. But going through a mental health struggle is one of the bravest and one of the bravest things someone can do, because I know what it's like. I've been there. And so I would never want someone to go through that alone, as I did previously.
Yes, seeking help is extremely important. And from your experience or knowledge, what are the most common barriers that prevent Black individuals from accessing mental health services?
So a few barriers I would say is, we touched on stigma, and then also, the fear of, gonna be misheard. Like, I think that's still stigma. But then also, when I touched on the lack of diversity in the workforce, I think there has to be more diversity in the mental health workforce, and just being able to see therapists or counselors that look like us and look like that we're able to understand, because I'll share kind of like my experience with just like reaching out for mental health support, and like I had to spend days and weeks just searching and searching and searching for a therapist that would suit me, and that would suit my insurance as well. That's another barrier, like access to care, and dealing with insurance. Kind of like having to search for a therapist or a counselor for days, weeks, emailing and calling them, and just also the age in these therapists, like the ones I was seeing was kind of like an older age group. And so if I like have a therapist as an older age group, I'm not even able to they're not able to understand me, being from a Gen Z generation, a younger generation. And so that's kind of a barrier that we kind of like have to advocate for in Black community, like seeking more diverse work in the workforce. And then also another barrier is just I would say and our youths are being directed to the 911 crisis. I mean 911, like instead of it going directly to 988, like some of them are being incarcerated in the Black community. Some of our youths are being incarcerated instead of being being transported to get mental health care. Some of them are being incarcerated, and I feel like the fact that someone's struggling with a mental health condition and being in that vulnerable state, being in that vulnerable position, and isn't able to get that care that they need, instead they're being incarcerated and being locked up. I feel like that is a huge break in our trust in the Black community. And I think that it should be our youth are supposed to be getting that care and getting that access here, getting the right treatment instead of being incarcerated. So I feel like that's another barrier we face. So people are scared to get that care. People are scared to call the 988 hotline because they don't want to be incarcerated. They don't want to be like transported to instead of getting help, instead of getting that mental health care. They feel like, hey, it's better for me not to even call. It's better for me not to even, open up about my mental health, because they're scared and they're afraid of what's going to happen next. And so I think that's a huge barrier as well. And then the last barrier I would say is also, people that are struggling with their mental health. Some of them are, being denied housing, and just like, services to be able to like kind of apply for housing. And, I feel like that's another barrier as well. Like, and then also kind of like just facing mental health struggles, and being able to get that right care. For example, there has been times where I have gone through several mental health challenges, and I found myself feeling like I was alone. I found myself feeling like, I was like my voice wasn't heard. And so I feel like sometimes we as Black African Americans, and when we struggle with mental health, we are scared to like go to get access to care because we're afraid that our voices are going to hurt. I think that's another form of stigma as well.
Following your idea, and of course, highlighting the importance of talking about what is happening in your mental health. Mary, how can healthcare providers and institutions build trust with the Black community regarding mental health care?
Um, as I said before, I think increasing the diversity in the workforce is something that can help um, very much. And I feel like, just being able to have culturally competent training included in, mental health trainings as well. Being able to provide services that are not limited to Black Americans, and just like, being able to build that trust from there. And it's very important because when we're able to see people who look like us, people that, are able to like understand our experiences and understand where we're coming from, helps, and it helps to build that trust as well. And it just it just creates a safe space. We don't have to hold back what we're experiencing. We don't have to hold back what we're feeling, or kind of like, you know, um, limit it. We don't have to play it down, is what I'm saying. Like, we can fully be ourselves, and we can fully heal and, recover as we are supposed to, when it comes to like just, seeking that help and seeking that treatment. And I would like to say, like, this is something that um, you know, mental organizations can continue to do, and just, continue to work towards, just building that in our community, and just being able to empathize, and just like be able to like view our side of things.
Absolutely. Mary, you touched on the topic of your experience of searching for a Black mental health therapist and how challenging that was. Why is representation in the field so important?
As I said earlier, reputation is important because, in seeking help, in seeking treatment, I feel like it's important that we're able to see ourselves in that support system. We're able to see ourselves in the care that we're getting, because, it's important that we have, we have people in the workforce that are able to like understand us, understand where we're coming from, understand, us in terms of the Black community, and just be able to like have someone that, we see that looks like us, and it builds that trust, right? Like, for example, if I'm, searching and searching and searching for hours, I feel like, there's a reason why I'm searching, right? There's a reason why
Mhm.
I'm looking for someone that looks like me, right? And that's because I feel I would be heard. I feel like this is someone I would trust, right? And so that is why it's so important, because when we're not seeing someone who looks like us in the field, we're less likely to actually get that support. We're less likely to actually open up, and for the services that we're reaching out to actually work, right?
I agree.
Yes, Mary, unfortunately, suicide rates have been rising among the young Black men and women. What do you think are the most warning signs families and communities should be aware of?
So I would say withdrawal. And when you notice, someone, maybe your family, someone, friend, someone that you might know is starting to withdraw, socially, or, this person is usually a bubbly and happy person, or this person is usually very talkative, and you start to notice that this person is withdrawing, or they don't usually, do the things that you see that they love doing. That might be a sign that you might want to check up on this person, or that you notice this person is, being in their room more, or notice this person is kind of, talking more about suicide. You're talking more about wanting to harm themselves or others. They're, kind of giving their stuff away. They're kind of like talking about themselves in the past, or they're you notice that their appearance is different than usual. Like maybe it might be their tone or the way that they kind of like appear, whether it might be through their physical appearance or just, you kind of notice a shift in, their tone. I would say this is a sign you might want to check on them. Or even you might notice that this person is sleeping more or this person is sleeping less. Like, for example, they're sleeping like throughout the day, or they're always like, awake, or maybe they're eating more and eating less, probably like, and they're kind of like doing less. You find like, maybe they usually love going to play basketball or play, or like, maybe they have a hobby that they usually like doing, and for a few weeks they haven't really done this hobby, or they're kind of like just isolating themselves, or they don't usually they're maybe skipping school, or something out of the norm. This might be a sign that just check up on them and see how they're doing, and create that conversation, and just approach them and be like, hey, I noticed this, and I'm here if you want to talk, and if you need a listening ear, if you need someone just to kind of talk to, or you might kind of just someone that just spend more time with them and just see how they're doing, and maybe try to approach the conversation in a compassionate way, instead of kind of sounding super direct, because it's important the language that we use when we're trying to talk to someone who might not be doing so well, who might be struggling mentally. So making sure to use the right language and making sure to kind of let them know that you're a safe person for them.
Yes. So, Mary, as we know, you are a suicide prevention activist, which is extremely profound. What are some culturally relevant approaches to suicide prevention in the Black community?
So just build, like I mentioned earlier, building that safe place where people can feel heard, where people can feel like they can open up and talk about their struggles, and they don't have to feel like they have to hold back, or they don't have to feel like they're going to be judged or misheard. And so just allowing people to know that mental health is something, it's a conversation where they don't have to shy away from. It's a conversation where they can fully be open and express themselves. And I believe that, for a really long time in the Black community, there has been a whole lot of conversation, a whole less of conversation about mental health. It's always been a taboo topic that people, don't really talk about in our community. It's been a conversation where, people don't really address. They always, kind of say like what goes on in this house has to stay in this house. And it always has to be like a secret thing where you cannot tell people outside of the family. And so when we begin to talk about mental health is when our healing journey in the Black community starts. And so I feel like, just being able to be the conversation starter in our community as a way of, breaking that generational cycle, and, just also kind of, um, you know, just letting folks know that their voice holds so much power, and their experience holds so much power, and they have the ability to save a life, by just talking about their experience and talking about their story. I kind of, in just my story, the way I started talking about mental health, I never saw myself, you know, in this space that I'm in right now. I never saw myself, being here right now talking about mental health stigma. I, just in my story, in going through what I did, I never saw hope for myself. I never saw a future for myself. And so when we're able to kind of, let people know that mental health is something that there's it's a possibility of recovery. Recovery is possible. that's when we begin to see a future for ourselves. That's when we begin to see hope. It creates it creates hope for others when we talk about mental health. And so I'm not sure if that answered the question, but I think what I was really, my biggest answer is just being able to talk about it and being able to, allow people know that mental health recovery is possible and there is hope available.
Following your words, yes, following your words, Mary, you affirm that your mission is to help people feel less alone in their pain by sharing her story or your story on a national level. That's why I want to know how can churches, schools, and community organizations help support mental health awareness and suicide prevention?
Yes. So I think this is a huge question for me because I love to address, the church part and also the school part and organizations as well. So, in the church, before there wasn't much conversation going on about mental health in church. People would say pray it away. People would say talk to God. And, I feel that mental health could be something where it could also be intertwined in our faith. It could be a conversation that we're talking about and also intertwining that in our faith beliefs. There's always room for the conversation in churches. It's not something where we have to choose or where we have to pick one or where we have to ignore the other instead of, just incorporating both. And, in churches, I believe that just also incorporating mental health trainings, incorporating a platform in the church where people are able to kind of, talk about mental health and people are able to just recognize that mental health is something that is so important, because when we begin to neglect our mental health, I believe that other aspects of our lives are always affected, right? And so when we're putting the conversation of mental health first, it creates a space of healing where we're able to address the other parts of our lives as well. Just bringing in more of the conversation of mental health in the faith space and just training faith leaders on how to address mental health and how to go about the topic of mental health in a way where it creates, a space of, people are able to be vulnerable, people are able to open up, and they're not shying away from the conversation. Is where, I've said this multiple times in this conversation, but is where the healing begins in the faith community. So just bringing in more trainings and more programs and, also in schools and in organizations, just addressing mental health also is so important, because when students are able to, because my experience as well, in middle school, mental health wasn't something that was really talked about. Mental health, in middle school, that was when I started struggling, with mental health. And so if there was someone, in my school, there was a program or anything that, was there built for mental health, I would have been able to seek the help that I needed on time. And I think that's so important for, students that are able to see, they're able to be pointed towards the right direction of seeking that help that they need. And so building in programs for students in schools where students are able to get that mental health support, more psychologists in schools, bringing in more mental health professionals, and just, incorporating mental health into the school syllabus, into our school, educational system is so important and crucial to students, to be able to get that care on time and not have to wait until they're the age of 19 or at the age of 22 before they're able to access care. And so for organizations, I would say, also having trainings for the workers as well, mental health trainings for workers, and just, people like mental health days, being able to take off work for being able to take care of your mental health, right, in different organizations, and being able to cater for services towards workers is so important as well. And I don't know if this is something that could be done, but I just want to throw this out there though. You know how in when they say that, this is the benefits that you can gain when you apply for this job or something. I don't know, I feel like it's important that maybe it could be put on there, that mental health benefits. I don't know, but yeah, that's just an idea that I wanted to see.
No, I like that because it's important. It's important, for lack of a better word. So Mary, what strategies can individuals use to protect their mental health and build resilience?
First of all, I think that one strategy is, um, something that has worked for me, which is journaling. Being able to journal what I'm going through and being able to pen it down has been able to help me realize, that this is something that I've been going through for a while. And so when I'm able to pen it down and put it to paper, I'm able to look back on it in a few years or even in a few months, and I'm able to come back to it and be like, wow, so this is how, this is how much I was struggling back then, and look how far I've come. Look at how much I've achieved from this point where I was into this other point. And it also is a way of being able to release and being able to, express ourselves. And, I feel like also some other coping mechanism that has worked for me is positive affirmations, when I'm able to kind of remind myself that, hey, you've done this before, you've been able to get through this. And so, if you've been able to do this before, then you surely have the strength and you surely have what it takes to do it again. So reminding myself by positive affirmation, reminding myself through positive affirmations that, I am not alone. I am strengthened by my faith. I have what it takes to get through this. And reminding myself that, this is just for a moment. And what I'm struggling with, what I'm going through is not permanent, but I will surely get through this. I will surely overcome the storm.
Yes, that is what it is about. Mary, we are here right now in the almost final, our final question of the interview. That's why I want to know, hey, how can we encourage open conversation as we are doing right now about mental health in Black families and communities?
I think that me saying this again is kind of repetitive of what I've said before, but I am huge on talking about it. I'm huge on just addressing that stigma, because whenever there's a stigma, and it could even be self-stigma, sometimes we feel like we don't want to talk about it because we're scared that, we don't know how other people are going to take it. We don't know how other people might view us. And that could just hold us back from our whole journey of recovery. And so just addressing that stigma within is a step to knowing that we are deserving of that healing. We are deserving of getting better. We are deserving of recovery. And apart from stigma and apart from talking about it, I would say, just also kind of, building a safer environment for folks, building a safer space where, it's a safe space where I'm saying, like, people don't have to be so, I'll say, like, just building a safe space in a way where, apart from talking about it, there are resources, there are enough resources in order for us to get, towards that point of recovery as well. And so just standing up for what we want in our community and being the hope that we want to see, being that light in the midst of the darkness, in my journey of speaking out, in my journey of becoming an activist and becoming an advocate for mental health, becoming that voice for other people, I had to realize that this is not just a fight for myself, but this is a fight for other people. The thousands or millions of other people that are struggling in silence, that are having to go through it alone, that are having to just struggle and not being able to get the care that they need. And continuing to be that person who is advocating, continuing to be that source of light to other people, and using our voice collectively. I think there's power in that. There's power in collective activism, and there's power in just coming out and saying, hey, this is what we stand for, this is what we are advocating for. And so there might be setbacks, there might be obstacles, there might be challenges that we might face in this journey of reaching out for help, and in this journey of fighting for cure and fighting for our resources, fighting for our needs. But letting ourselves know that that would not be something that will set us back. That would not be something that will cause us to give up. And that will not be something that will limit us. Realizing that just activism and just getting there, it takes multiple steps. But once we are able to step our foot out of the door, I believe that that's a way forward. That's a way forward of just reaching where we want to with our goals of being able to seek the right access, of being able to get that care that we need. So being able to collectively use our voices and fight this fight, not alone, but as a community.
Thank you, Mary. Before I approach the last question, I do want to say I love the quote when you said, be the light in the midst of the darkness. I literally have that written on my wall. So I love that you said that. So moving on to the last question, what policy changes or community initiatives are needed to improve mental health support for African Americans?
Yeah, I'd say, as I mentioned earlier, more diverse workforce is another. It's a policy that we are still advocating for, and we're looking to just increase the diversity in the workforce. And another policy is school-based mental health. And when we're able to bring in mental health resources in schools, I think it just helps students recognize that mental health is something that's made available to them and is ready to cater for the needs of students, and not only students, but Black and African American students as well, that are not able to get the care that they need outside of school, due to maybe one reason or another. For example, their insurance, or just the fact that maybe their parents might not really be on board with the fact of reaching out for mental health. And then another policy is just being able to, like I mentioned earlier, keep our youths out of being incarcerated, right, for mental health struggles, and being able to just bring in those youths that are in need of mental health services to the right support rate. And so just fighting for the Black community, and just keeping our youths out of the criminal justice system.
Being able to, we can be light in every other's people's lives. Okay, in conclusion, Mary Lawal emphasized the urgent need to address mental health disparities in the African American community, not only in DC, national, everything in the US deserves to have a well mental health. Mary highlights the impact of stigma, systematic barriers, and limited access to care, advocating always for education, policy changes, and cultural competence support. And Mary finally calls for collective action to ensure equitable mental health resources for all our neighbors. So, Mary, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your conversation. Please let us know how can we find you in our social media.
Of course. You can find me. Wait, sorry. Just wanted to repeat. You wanted me to state my Instagram, right?
How can we find you in our social media?
Okay. So, you can find me at Journey with Mary with 2 Y's at the end of the Mary.
Once again, thank you so much, Mary. Taylor, I don't know if you want to say something.
No, just thank you for your time. Thank you for all of your insight, and thank you for everything that you're doing. I can tell you're very passionate about it, so thank you for everything, and thank you for being transparent as well.
Of course, thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to, speak on this topic that is very dear to my heart. And, I am so glad to be here.